Chapter 10, Hello, Niveton. Kino Amark. The mosquitoes began to bite me, and I brushed them away irately. If I did not move from my squatting position, my legs would soon be too numb to walk. Piper was taking too long, and I wondered where she and Mayo were now. In a different circumstance, I would have been terrified to linger in this part of Niveton, but knowing that Piper was real like me made a difference. Back when I tended to her a few weeks ago, when I saw her lying on the ground, her gray skin almost drove me away. It looked so eerie, and I thought she needed a bath, a long one, with a lot of scrubbing. When she kept quiet over my questions, I never thought of her as a ghost because she was all flesh, her body was warm, and although her skin color was gray, it seemed to suit her. She was so tiny, though, that it was hard to put an age on her. Perhaps she was younger than I. I am still amazed every time I touch her and feel the heat on her skin, only to vanish right under my nose. Well, I don't think anybody could blame me for feeling that. I stretched my legs in front of me as I sat. I dared not make any significant movements because someone could spot me. My heart froze when something rustled in front of me, but I found that nobody was there. "Piper?" I whispered. "Kino, it's me," I heard a soft voice. Then she showed herself. Sorry it took so long, but Mayo's strides were short, and he's slow. I smiled at her. "There's no need to explain." She smiled back and held her hand out to me. "Let's go. We have to walk faster. My father is not home yet, and I want to reach the house before he does," she said. I took her hand and stood up, watching as my hand vanished right in front of me. Then the invisibility traveled slowly up to my arm, then to my body, and down to my legs. I shivered a bit. This was surreal. "Sorry for the shivers," I said. "But this is so unusual." "It's all right. I would have shivered many times more if our places were switched," she said lightly. Piper pulled at my hand and started pacing faster. I watched as the darkness enveloped us. There were times I felt like I was going to stumble the way Mayo did earlier. When you cannot see your feet right in front of you, it is challenging to figure out where your feet would land next. Not that it mattered a lot because it was already dark, and even if my body were visible, I was pretty sure it would still be an arduous journey. "Can I ask a question?" I said, breaking the silence. Piper did not respond immediately, and I thought she did not hear me. "Yes, but speak softly. Nivens are patrolling around the town so they could warn the villagers if a stranger enters the province." I shut up immediately, imagining hidden eyes watching us from everywhere. "I seem to see your footsteps everywhere. Were you following me?" I asked. Her grip on my hand tightened. Maybe she did not want to tell me why, but I needed to know. To be stalked by a person was one thing, but to have a ghost for a stalker was insane. "I don't like bullies," she said. Oh. She thought I needed to be protected. It was utterly embarrassing for my pride but equally sweet and touching at the same time. "I can fight them off myself, you know." My cheeks heated up in embarrassment. "You don't need to worry about me." "I know. I saw you stand up to them many times. But that time you helped me when I passed out, it changed something in me, in what I believed in." Piper tugged me to her left to avoid a tree. "I used to think that all Akeans were all the same. Canellans, Direllans, Lacayans, all of you, it didn't matter which province you come from. You're as cruel as your emperor." "Why would you think that?" "We've been told since we started walking that Akeans were ruthless and heartless and all the bad things the elders could think of. We didn't use to hide, you know. We were once a flourishing town and earned from tourists coming in from the whole of Akea. Niveton was one of the main attractions in Akea, it being so close to Canella. But that changed just a few moon turns ago, and now, we've been erased from the map," she continued. "I still see your province on the map. It isn't the same. Ghost Town is not the same as Niveton." She hissed. "Many Nivens were killed in a storm which led to flooding. Since then, the elders of the town thought it best to hide instead. Mask ourselves behind our powers. It wasn't difficult for us. We didn't think that we'd be branded as ghosts, though, but well, you saw it yourself. With the way we behave, how can anyone else not mistake us for anything else? She was right. The ghost brand suited them, and it was a good disguise, too. You said I changed your mind. I paused. What exactly did you mean by that? She quickened her steps. You were the first I encountered who was not an Ivan. I was a stranger, and yet, you still reached out to me. How can I make myself believe you are bad? Well, not all Akeans are good, I said. There will always be bullies. She chuckled softly. You don't have to lecture me about bullies. They are everywhere, even in our town, she said. That's true. Maybe we were not so different after all. And there's the Emperor, she said. What about the Emperor? Is he really evil? I asked. Piper was silent for a while before she answered me. Where have you been, Kino? Don't tell me that I know more about what's happening outside of Niven than you? She was not joking this time. Before I could protest, she continued, the elders in Niven have been meeting for several nights now. I don't know what they're discussing, but, she paused. Last week, I was out looking for Kogi and couldn't find him. You see, he's such a dear friend, and I wanted to play with him. He's good in the trees. But he wasn't around. When I asked his mother, she told me that Kogi had gone missing and that he probably trailed after the 24 Nivens that went outside of Nivedon. I don't know what for, though. Ghosts out in Akea? Roaming the Canellan streets? I hope Mother does not encounter any of them or she might get terrified. Already, I worried about her. Perish the thought. I don't know what they will do, but have you heard that there was heavy flooding in Dirella? She finished. I have never been there. I haven't heard. There was flooding in that province. It started several days ago. I think that's where Kogi went. I don't know what the Nivens plan to do there, but I can only hope they will save Direllans. I need to tell Mother. She was back in our cottage at Wawang, and if a rebellion was starting in the south, then maybe we could pose as refugees there. That would be an appropriate hiding place. I had to come up with a good plan soon. Why do you think he's evil? Piper asked. The Emperor, I mean, why is he so bad? I can't say why, but life for my mother and me has been difficult. She's the royal scribe, but we're living on pennies. Wow, the royal scribe? She gushed. What does she do? She writes stories for the Emperor. I'm not so sure what she does from there. She meets with the Emperor every fortnight. I stopped talking because I had no idea what to say next. It must be great to see the Emperor often, she said. I mean, I would love to have that chance. Even though you said the Emperor's evil? I asked. He's the Emperor regardless. There must be something about him that's worth seeing. How do I respond to that? I shrugged. I haven't met anyone who's gone to the palace before, she paused. Take me. You've got to promise to take me. Her voice grew loud. Keep your voice down, I warned. Oops, sorry, she said. I chuckled. You're asking me as though it's that easy. It's not. We'll need a carriage. Can't you get one? She asked. No. I don't have enough coins. Piper grew silent. I thought she had let go of the topic already, only to find out that she was thinking of other ways to go to the palace. How about going on foot then? She asked. Impossible. That far? I wrinkled my nose. Maybe. Going to the palace is the kind of adventure that needs planning, I said. All right, she whispered. That's it? I asked, surprised that she stopped insisting on running straight to the palace. Piper laughed. Uh-huh. I know we can't afford the fare. I blushed and felt Piper tensing her grip, too. So your mother goes to the palace alone? She asked. Yes, I replied. Maybe we can go with her. No, I said quickly. Why not? She asked. It sounds like you don't want to take me there. It's not like that. I hesitated. I don't want to go to the palace myself, so I couldn't take you there. But why is that? She muttered under her breath. How could I explain to Piper that being in the Canellan Palace reminded me that I was powerless, and unborn, without necessarily sounding bitter and ashamed of myself? Because. Just because, I simply said and made no effort to explain. Piper stopped talking to me after that, and we concentrated on the journey through the dark forest instead. After a few more minutes of walking in silence, I saw Niveton in all its quaint grandeur. There were a few tree houses with the lights on. Dear gods, this place must look lovely with the sun's and moon's rays seeping through the spaces between the leaves. I wish it were morning already. Seems like everybody has turned in for the night, she said. Piper led me towards her family's treehouse, and we climbed up the tree. I was exhausted by the time we reached the top, and I followed Piper wearily inside the house. A man was sitting on a wooden bench. Right across him was Mayo, stiffly seated on the edge of his chair. The man's eyes scared me because they were shooting daggers at Piper and me. We were still invisible, and yet I knew he could sense us. Piper let go of my hand. Father! She uttered in panic. Big trouble, young lady, the man said admonishingly. Show your friends to your room and be back here as fast as you can, where you will grow white hair making sandals inside your room. I saw Piper's eyes widen. I almost flew to her bedroom as she hurriedly pushed Mayo and me inside. When the door closed, Mayo broke the silence. I'm hungry, he said. If I hadn't been scared for Piper, I would have laughed. Please stop moving around, Mayo pleaded. You're giving me a headache, and I'm too hungry for a headache. I'm so close to passing out any moment now, you know. I stopped and sat beside him on Piper's bed. I'm worried. She might have broken the Niven rules by showing herself to us and by letting us know what her power is. I mulled inside my head. That meant Mayo's and my life were both in danger. I prayed that her father would be kind enough to believe that we had pure hearts. I looked at Mayo, who sat beside me, looking as baffled as I was. Mayo may have his shortcomings, but I trusted him with all my life. I won't tell anyone, Mayo grumbled. Of course, we won't tell anyone. We both swore oaths. A palace soldier would never break an oath, I told Mayo. He wanted to become a soldier so badly when he came of age. He would surely take our oaths to heart. Aren't you hungry? He asked. Will you stop thinking about food for once? I snapped. Easy for you to say, he murmured, fiddling with his shirt. I was tense while we waited in silence for Piper to come back. I wanted to listen to the conversation outside the bedroom door but decided not to. If I got caught, it would make Piper's father think that I was not as trustworthy as his daughter believed me to be. The bedroom door opened, and I stood up cautiously, hoping to hear good news from Piper. Instead, I found myself staring at her father. You will not tell one soul about what you discovered here tonight, he said in a cold tone. I nodded nervously. Not one word, sir. I promise, I said, my voice breaking a little. He regarded Mayo and me afterward. There is food outside. Go and eat with Piper. After dinner, you will sleep immediately. We'll take you back early in the morning, so nobody sees you. I can't risk the entire village knowing about your presence, he said. Mayo looked very nervous, but when he heard about dinner, he smiled briefly, and he was the first to follow Piper's father to the kitchen. There, Piper sat on one of the chairs, and I glanced at her, wanting to know if she would be punished. She looked down on her food. A woman who looked about the same age as Piper's father was also seated. Piper's father took his seat at the head of the table. This is my wife, Laren, Piper's father said. The woman had blonde hair like Piper's, although hers took on a darker hue. She was slightly stockier. Please sit down and tell me your names, the kindly woman said. Her lips were frozen in a smile. We did as we were told, and I grabbed the chair opposite Piper. Mayo sat next to me. Mayo Kalo, sir, Mayo said. I'm from Tirona village. Piper's father looked at me. I'm Kino Amark, sir. From Wawang village. I am Andoni San Diego, Piper's father said. Please say your grace and then eat. I bowed down and murmured a short prayer of thanks. When I was done, I saw that Mayo had already grabbed a couple of breadsticks and was munching on one. Mistress Laren stood up and gave us some soup. Piper remained quiet. I took a slice of bread and started eating too. There was beef jerky on the table, and I took one, wanting to chew on it because I could not remember when I last tasted meat. Amark, you said? Mistress Laren asked. Yes, ma'am. I nodded. Mistress Laren glanced at Master Andoni. He reminds me of him, she said. Master Andoni looked at me again for a longer time, searching my face, and I blushed. I never liked being stared at. Where's your father? He asked. I shook my head. He's dead, I said. That's what Mother told me. It struck me as odd that Master Andoni asked me where my father was instead of asking who he was. What power do you have, if you don't mind me asking? Master Andoni asked. I don't mind, sir. But I'm afraid this conversation won't interest you further. You see, I have no power, I said. His eyebrows shot up. Interesting. I thought everyone in Akea is expected to have some sort of power. Maybe I'm from another world, sir, I said and grinned, munching on the jerky. Piper's shoulder shook, and I knew she must have been trying so hard to keep herself from giggling too loudly. The only way I could deal with the sting of not having any power was by joking about it. Well, I'm sure it will show up soon, and when that happens, please let me know, Master Andoni said. Yes, sir. I'll be sure to do that, I smiled at him. That meant that even if he was mad at Piper, he would not cut off our communication. I went to bed happy knowing that. When dawn broke, Master Andoni roused us. Get up, we need to get moving, he said. I opened my eyes and saw Piper standing in front of me already. She was holding slices of bread. She gave me one. The other piece she handed to Mayo, who was by now already combing his dark hair. I smelled the bread, and my mouth watered as I caught a whiff of the raisins in between the airy pastry. I loved freshly baked bread, and it was seldom Mother and I got to eat hot bread. I greedily stuffed the bread into my mouth. After the quick breakfast, we made our way down from the treehouse. The wind blew coldly as we hit the ground. I was thankful that climbing down the ladder was much more comfortable than going up. I'll take Mayo, and you'll go with Piper, Master Andoni said. Piper immediately went to my side and took my hand. In a few seconds, I felt the sensation again, that nervousness, as I watched myself vanish. The forest was still dark, but Master Andoni walked ahead of us as though the darkness cloaking us was not a hindrance. He was heavier than Piper, but I could not see or hear his footsteps. He must have been an expert in hiding if he was able to mask them. I could not say the same for Mayo, though, because it was easier to predict where he was, given his clumsy movements. Master Andoni had to chastise him every now and then for being exceedingly noisy. I held Piper's hand tighter and followed wherever she pulled me. Before totally leaving all sight of Nivedan, I glanced back. The tree houses were beautiful, just as I thought they would be. I wish I had more time to see them in broad daylight. We had already traveled for several hours before I realized that we were coursing a different path. I looked around, some faint rays of light were beginning to show through the gaps from the canopy of trees. A creek trailed alongside the route we were taking. Is this the path we took last night? I asked. No, this is the secret passage, Piper said quietly. You mean like a shortcut to Nivedan? Something like that, she said. When we reached the foot of Mount Rikus, Sisis was already high, and I was starting to get drenched in sweat. This time, I did not talk to Piper. I was afraid that her father might hear what we would talk about and that I might get her in trouble again. I saw the two large trees that marked the entrance to Canella, which led to the Akea trading market. This is as far as we can take you. If anybody asks, make an excuse that you camped outside watching stars for a school activity. Your parents will not be happy, but that's your punishment to bear, Master Andoni chided. Mayo's body appeared, and then Piper let go of my hand. My body showed too, and I felt relieved. I still could not see Piper and her father, though. Thank you for letting us stay with you, I began. Thank you, sir, Mayo echoed. He was blushing. I'm sorry if it has been a harder trek for you. I'm not used to trekking inside forests and climbing mountains. Nonsense. If you want to be a soldier, you will work on your movements. You don't have to be invisible to appear hidden, he said. Mayo blushed profusely, but he was also beaming. Thank you, sir. I'll keep that in mind, he said. Next time, you will have softer footsteps. I'll see to that. Piper will make you a pair of sandals, he said. It sounded as though he was either making a joke or a threat. A soft moan of protest escaped Piper's mouth, causing Mayo and I to grin. Goodbye, Piper, I said. I wish I could see her face. True enough, her head popped from thin air, and Mayo let out a shriek. I was as shocked as he was, but I was more happy than frightened. How could Mayo be scared of Piper's pretty face? Goodbye, Kino, Piper said as she vanished again. I watched as Master Andoni's and Piper's footsteps retreated to the ghost town. Greatest adventure ever! Mayo exclaimed. Keep quiet, I said. Let's head home. I was walking slowly at first because I felt tired from the long journey. Niveton. It was such a magical place. Wait a minute, Niveton was perfect, for Mother and me. Thank the gods. Was it where we should be? Nobody ever goes there, and even the Emperor does not care for the ghost town anymore, which meant that it was the perfect hiding place for us. But first, I had to convince Mother. If Master Andoni knew that we wanted to get out of Canella and hide from the Emperor, maybe he would help us. I looked at Mayo, who was walking lazily beside me. He looked tired too, but his eyes were shining with excitement. When he caught my eye, he grinned. First, there's Distantekis. Did you see the look on their faces? He asked, referring to Conrad and Lima. Then, a ghost. Stop referring to Piper as a ghost, she's not, I replied, but Mayo ignored me as though he heard nothing. Maybe we could ask Piper to stay with us at all times so we could go on pretending you have Distantekis. I shook my head. No, Mayo. It will get Piper into a heap of trouble with her father. His shoulders slumped, and he pouted. Maybe from time to time, if we get bullied too much, but I don't want to take advantage of her friendship, I said. All right. He did not sound convinced. I felt like Niveton was calling to me, and a wave of excitement passed through my body. I have to run home now, Mayo. Let's split up, I said. As soon as he nodded, I ran all the way home, hands pumping the air as I looked forward to seeing my mother. Our cottage grew more prominent as I ran closer to it. Upon reaching home, I pushed the door open excitedly. Mother turned to look at me. She looked worried, but it was immediately replaced by anger when she saw me. Why didn't you come home last night? She asked as she moved towards me for a hug. I was worried, she added as she kept on kissing my cheeks. A moon turn ago, she could still kiss me on top of my head, but I had grown slightly taller this moon turn, and Mother was a short woman. Mother, I said. I can't hold on to the excitement any longer. I know the perfect place for us to hide from the Emperor. She regarded me thoughtfully. Don't tell me you've been up roaming Akea all night just for that. I grinned and nodded. She was still holding my face. I have been to the perfect hiding place, I began. The ghost town. Mother's face went pale. Her hold on my face loosened, and I had to move fast to catch her as she fainted. Well, my news was good, but I never thought it could take somebody's breath away, literally and figuratively. Grunting, I dragged Mother to her room and thanked the gods again that she had such a small frame. It still took me some time to put her on the bed, though. I hoped that she would not bruise her back because I accidentally hit her backside against the wooden pole of the bed. I kissed her on the forehead after I covered her with a blanket up to her chin. "I'll protect you, Mother," I whispered. "There will be no more nightmares." Then I headed outside to get some herbs to help with her fainting spell. Later in the day, I would have to come up with a plan.